Amarnath pilgrims have been advised by the government to leave the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir at the earliest due to some security concerns.
Now is the time to remove legal provisions like Article 35A, provisions which cause ambiguity about the status of J&K. As for Article 370, it's outright discriminatory.
August 5th, 2019. A historic day that changed India forever.
राष्ट्रपति संसद की सिफारिश पर यह घोषणा इस दिन भारत के राष्ट्रपति द्वारा इस घोषणा पर हस्ताक्षर किए जाएंगे और इसे सरकारी गैजेट में प्रकाशित अनुच्छेद 370 के सभी खंड लागू नहीं होंगे सिवाय खंड 1 के नामक तदनुसार पढ़ा जाएगा.
The government issued a presidential order superseding the 1954 order that made all the provisions of the Indian constitution applicable to the former state of Jammu and Kashmir. The special status of the state of Jammu and Kashmir was revoked.
जब दोनों संकल्प और बिल लेकर आया हूं तो मैं मानता हूं कि जम्मू कश्मीर में एक लंबे रक्तपात भरे युग का अंत धारा 370 के समाप्त होने से बनेगा. 370 के कारण जम्मू कश्मीर में कभी भी लोकतंत्र प्रकोलित नहीं हुआ. 370 और 35 के कारण भ्रष्टाचार बड़ा फला फूला बड़ा पनपा और चरम सीमा पर पहुंचा. शिक्षा लेने के लिए जम्मू कश्मीर के बच्चों को देश भर के शिक्षा संस्थानों में जाना पड़ता है. इसका भी कारण 370 है. मान्यवर, महिला विरोधी भी है, दलित विरोधी भी है, आदिवासी विरोधी भी है और आतंकवाद की जड़ भी 370 है.
It took 70 years for India to abrogate Article 370. It was the dawn of a new era for Kashmir. A region that had been witnessing 30 years of unrest and conflict. This is the annual Amarnath Yatra, or pilgrimage, that draws tens of thousands of pilgrims. On the 2nd of August 2019, an advisory was issued for devotees to cut their journey short and leave the Kashmir Valley as soon as possible. Other tourists too were advised to leave the region for safety concerns. The pilgrimage was eventually called off. At the same time, a large number of soldiers were mobilized in the region. The central government had also imposed a security lockdown in the then presidential-ruled state.
And to avoid any kind of rioting, telecommunications were cut off in the early hours of August 5th, just before the historic announcement.
A new chapter was being written for a new Kashmir. The Article 370 allowed the then state Jammu and Kashmir a certain amount of autonomy. Its own constitution, a separate flag and freedom to make laws, whereas foreign affairs, defense and communications remained the preserve of the central government. As a result, Jammu and Kashmir could make its own rules relating to permanent residency, ownership of property and fundamental rights. It could also bar Indians from outside the state from purchasing property or settling there. The article was drafted in Part 21 of the Indian Constitution, titled Temporary, Transitional and Special Provisions. But not anymore.
One of the major reasons why Article 370 was abrogated, along with 35A, the constitutional decision 2 years ago, was primarily because the situation was proving that as if it is moving towards getting worsened with greater involvement of Pakistan as a part of the proxy war. From 2016 onwards, especially the time when Burhan Wani had become very, very active, he was killed in 2016, it was evident that a new generation leadership had come about. And this was far more active, much more adept at using social media and the new ways of warfare and things like that. And therefore, the final decision after 3 years of fighting this militancy and terrorism after 2016, it became evident that unless something more drastic was done, unless something clearly was done to send home a message to Pakistan and the people of Jammu and Kashmir who were looking towards separatism, this problem would fester and become even more complex.
But this bold step was not an overnight decision. In order to understand the issue of Kashmir, it's important to know its history and how the fight for the northern state began 75 years ago. This is Hari Singh, the last ruling Maharaja of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, the man who gave Kashmir its special status. Unlike other princely states which aligned themselves with one nation or the other, Singh wanted independence for Kashmir. To avert pressure to join either new nation, the Maharaja signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan. India did not sign a similar standstill agreement with the princely state.
Both India and Pakistan were angling to assimilate Jammu and Kashmir into their respective territories, but Maharaja, the Hindu ruler of the Muslim-majority princely state, was not committing to either side.
There was huge pressure on the Maharaja because of the anti-establishment sentiment among the people. Sheikh Abdullah, who launched the Quit Kashmir agitation against the Maharaja, had been arrested, despite repeated requests by Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and the Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, to release him. October 22nd, 1947. 2 months after the partition of India, in an effort to capture Kashmir and to preempt the possibility of its ruler joining India, Pakistan unilaterally broke the standstill agreement and launched an invasion to forcibly capture Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan Army regulars and tribesmen laid siege on Baramulla first, and then closed in on Srinagar. The raiders plundered, pillaged, and killed thousands of men, women, and children. A distraught Hari Singh appealed to India for help.
The whole problem goes back to 1947. And I would say, you see, India was just a young state aspiring to do good to its people, primarily looking towards progress. And suddenly on the first day of its independence, maybe 2 months later, 22nd October, when the whole problem started, you have this major issue of a state, a very strategically located state, which is virtually the crown of India, right on top, which is close to China, close to Pakistan, close to the Central Asian republics, strategically located in such a place, dithering about whether it needs to join Pakistan or India. And that's also the indecision was based on its ethnic and religious identities. No, this was not an easy situation to overcome. And we could have, of course, marched in with the army at every other place and immediately taken decisions. But I think India was a very politically mature state still. We did not want to intimidate. We did not want to trigger off these kinds of situations at the time of the birth of two nations. Pakistan is the one which actually stabbed India in the back.
The Governor-General of India, Lord Mountbatten, responded that in order to gain military assistance, Kashmir would have to accede to India, thus becoming part of the new country. He said, and we quote, "It is my government's wish that as soon as law and order have been restored in Jammu and Kashmir and her soil cleared of the invader, the question of the state's accession should be settled by a reference to the people." Following his advice, the Indian government attempted a referendum for the Kashmiri people to decide if they wanted to stay a part of India, Pakistan, or remain an independent state. The plebiscite could not take place. Finally, on the 26th of October 1947, the Maharaja signed the Instrument of Accession.
The whole of the princely state was given to the Dominion of India.
This included Jammu, Kashmir, northern areas, Ladakh, Trans-Karakoram Tract, and Aksai Chin. The first war between India and Pakistan lasted for 1 year, 2 months, and 2 weeks. After the Indo-Pakistani War of 1947-48, the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir was partially captured by Pakistan. International organizations call it Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, whereas India controls the majority of the region.
The Indian-administered territories elected a constituent assembly in 1951, which ratified the accession of the state to India in 1954.
But there was a third player as well, China. In 1956-57, China constructed a road through the disputed Aksai Chin area of Ladakh. Aksai Chin has an area the size of Switzerland that sits between the Chinese autonomous region of Xinjiang and Tibet. India's belated discovery of this road culminated in the Sino-Indian War of 1962. China continues to administer the northeastern boundary of Kashmir was drawn by the British Indian government, including surveyor William Johnson. Interestingly, in 1983, a map provided by Hung Ta-chen, a senior Chinese official at St. Petersburg, showed Aksai Chin in Kashmir territory similar to the Johnson Line. With the abrogation of Article 370, the central government has also made Ladakh a separate union territory, and this has irked India's eastern neighbor. China has refused to recognize the newly created union territory of Ladakh and has been raking up the issue at the United Nations Security Council since August 2019. New Delhi rebutted this by saying Ladakh is an integral and inalienable part of India. In August 2019, Indian Home Minister Amit Shah, in his iconic speech, declared that Aksai Chin was part of the Indian-administered Ladakh Union Territory. In fact, many experts linked the 2020-21 India-China skirmishes to India's decision to abrogate Article 370 that changed the status of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh.
After last year's Galwan incident, an enhancement of the overall defensive capability of 14 Corps has taken place with the induction of additional troops. We always talk about the mirror strength mirror deployment of the Indian troops against the PLA. That's exactly what has happened. The number of troops that the PLA has got in Ladakh, the Indian Army has also deployed similarly. So it is helping us in a very great way. But the other aspect is about logistics. And it's a major, major problem. Logistics, there's no doubt about it. And the Indian Army has shown its professionalism in the manner the Indian Army and the Air Force, to a great extent, have shown their ability to put together, act together in a period of just 2 months to bring 35 to 50,000 troops, deploy them there, create the habitat, create the storage facilities, make the necessary infrastructure, at least the basic infrastructure, to provide the readiness in case of any hostilities. I don't think those hostilities are coming our way. But despite that, I would say that we are in a far, far better position today to defend Ladakh.
Be it the 1962 war with China or the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, Kashmir has always been the bone of contention.
To resolve the border dispute between India and Pakistan in 1972, both countries signed the Shimla Agreement, recognizing a line of control in Kashmir.
A military line which does not constitute a legally recognized international boundary, but serves as the de facto border.
You see, the line of control which President Bill Clinton at one stage called it as the most dangerous place in the world, has a history behind it. It was the ceasefire line in 1949 under the UN resolution. And it was the place where the Indian Army actually stopped its operations. There is an erroneous perception that it is the place where both armies stopped their operations. That is not true. It is the Indian Army which stopped its operations at that particular time because it was in the process of pushing the tribals and the Pakistan forces back into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. This ceasefire line remained as such with the troops deployed what is called eyeball to eyeball. In 1972, the terminology was changed to the line of control. In the army, it is called LC, and outside it is called LOC. It is demarcated. It was demarcated and delineated both on maps and on ground. It's very different to the line of actual control which exists in Ladakh. Most people are unaware of this because there the perception of the line of actual control of India and Pakistan or India and China is different. And there is no demarcation, there is no delineation on the ground itself. That makes the LAC very different to the LOC.
And then came 1989, when a tidal wave of protest engulfed the valley.
A series of demonstrations, strikes and attacks on the Indian government started the Kashmir insurgency. Motivated by the success of the Afghan jihad, Pakistan instigated a widespread insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, hoping to push India out of the state. These protests had become the most important internal security issue in India. In late 1989, Bharatiya Janata Party leader Jia Lal Taplu and a retired judge, Nilkanth Ganju, were assassinated. These targeted killings started spreading a wave of terror among the Kashmiri pundits. Matters came to a head in January 1990. By this time, the Farooq Abdullah government had been dismissed and governor's rule had been imposed. Explosive speeches were broadcast from public address systems. It led to one of the biggest human rights violations on Indian soil, the exodus of Kashmiri pundits from the valley. But the bloodshed continued.
Initiation of the conflict in 1989 was at a time when the Cold War had just come to an end. In all the domains, India was at its weakest at that particular time. Militarily, we had 100,000 troops sitting in Sri Lanka. Financially, we had hardly any foreign exchange reserves. We had one of the biggest agitations, the Mandal agitation, going on at that particular time. Political stability at the center was very, very questionable at that particular time. And diplomatically, the whole world was in a flux. So this was the most opportune time at which Pakistan chose to initiate this problems. And one of the major triggers of this whole thing was the targeting of the Kashmiri Pandits and bringing in the ideological and religious angle to a conflict which had been political all this time. And that changed the whole nature of the conflict. Because from 1991, Islamic mercenaries from Afghanistan, freed up from Afghanistan, started pouring in under the sponsorship of the ISI. And for the next 5 years, till 1996, India was primarily fighting the foreign terrorists.
The abrogation of Article 370 was widely welcomed by the Kashmiri Pandit community, who hope to return home one day. 2 years after the revocation of the special status accorded to Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, infiltration along the line of control has decreased significantly, although militancy still remains a challenge in the Union territory.
There is a need for continuity in policy, number one. There is a need to have patience to see that the measures and the decisions we take are put through over a sustained period of time. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that taking policy decisions and changing these from time to time may not give us the kind of optimum results that we are looking at. Finally, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, they are the center of gravity. The idea of azadi in their minds is the center of gravity. We have to work both on the physical aspect of this and the mental aspect of it.